They say a place can look back at you. And when I arrived in Berat, Albania, I swear the city itself watched me, its thousand windows catching the light like eyes that remembered everything. Empires have risen and fallen here, yet this town of stone and spirit still hums softly against the Osum River, waiting for wanderers who listen. You're watching Passports to the Past, where history meets the road, and every journey tells the story of who we are. Every trip here begins the same way. A road stretching ahead, and a feeling that the world still has secrets to share. Today, we follow one of those secrets into the heart of Albania. The highway south from Tirana is a ribbon of sun and possibility. I left before dawn, when the capital still whispered itself awake. Vendors were stacking oranges and cherries beside the road, their hands quick and practiced, their smiles as warm as the rising light. The air smelled of diesel, wild thyme, and bread baked in stone ovens. I passed bunkers half swallowed by grass, grey domes built during the Cold War that now stand like fossils of fear. Goats wandered lazily across the road, unbothered by honking horns. Every few miles, someone waved as if we'd known each other in another life. As I drove, the hills opened into valleys patched with vineyards and cypress. I slowed, not from caution but reverence. There's something sacred about the way Albania greets you. No fanfare, just honesty. Every bend of the road seems to whisper, "You're almost home," even if you've never been here before. By the time I saw Berat's silhouette, clinging to the hillside like a dream refusing to fade, I already knew I'd found something rare. As I neared the city, I felt a rush of excitement stir in my heart, as I remembered what friends had told me about Berat. Crossing into Albania had been easier than a grocery run, a quick stamp at the border and a grin from the guard. "Welcome, my friend. Stay as long as you like." He wasn't joking. Americans can stay here for a full year without a visa, one of the friendliest policies in Europe. No fees, no hassle, no lines of impatient travelers. Just an invitation. Albania is a parliamentary republic, young and ambitious, learning democracy with the eagerness of someone tasting freedom for the first time. The lek is the local currency, though euros are accepted almost everywhere. English, especially among younger Albanians, is fluent and enthusiastic. The country is safe, the food generous, and the smiles genuine. It feels like Europe before it became self-conscious. I'd barely parked my car before someone shouted, "Mire si vini," welcome, and pointed me toward a small cafe overlooking the river. That's where I heard Joe Cocker music pumped through some speakers mounted on a wall nearby. The cafe was called Blue Windows, a terrace scattered with potted basil and mismatched chairs. Inside, an old-fashioned jukebox was playing softly, releasing that unmistakable gravelly voice into the air. I sat down and smiled at the attractive woman heading my way. She startled me when she spoke in English. "You like the music?" she asked. "You have good taste," I said. She turned, smiled, and said, "Once upon a time it was my job." Her name was Mara. She had copper hair pulled into a lazy knot, and eyes that had seen more stages than sunsets. She told me she'd toured with Joe Cocker as a backup singer. "When he passed," she said, "the world got too crazy. Everything seemed to be a performance. So I came here to be and live real again." She poured my coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and leaned on the counter. "Stay the afternoon," she said. "I'll show you why I never left." The flirtation was effortless, woven between words, the kind that happens when two people realize they share an unspoken rhythm. When the morning crowd thinned, Mara closed up the cafe and offered to show me around. She'd lived here long enough to know every hidden alley and every story worth hearing. And as we stepped into the sunlight, I realized my day had just taken a beautiful detour. We climbed through Berat's winding streets, past whitewashed homes that looked stitched into the mountainside. "Berat has stood for 2,000 years, Mara said. "Every stone has heard another empire's anthem. The Illyrians, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, all left their fingerprints. At the Kala fortress, churches and mosques stand side by side, sharing the same sky, like old neighbors who've learned the art of tolerance. Inside a chapel, gold leaf icons glowed in the dim light, their saints painted with infinite patience. Faith survived here because people did," she said softly. We reached a field dotted with concrete domes. "They're bunkers," she explained. "Our last dictator built them, hundreds of thousands, to keep us afraid." She ran her hand across the cold surface. "I was a child when the Cold War, the way of the world. People here were told the West wanted to destroy us. So we hid inside, and we forgot what sunlight felt like. Then she told me about her landlord, a wiry old man who'd been a teacher back then. He once built a secret radio from spare parts, she said. He'd tune into Italian stations just to hear laughter. He said it reminded him we weren't alone. She smiled faintly. Now, he listens to Joe old records I sang on. Says it's the same thing. Every window in Berat, she said, tells that same story. A place once shuttered, now wide open. That afternoon I rented a Vespa and we drove toward the Osum Canyon, where the river cuts through limestone cliffs so steep they look sculpted by gods. Waterfalls sparkled like broken glass, and the air tasted of moss and sunlight. Do you hear that? Mara asked. That's Albania beckoning. Far above, Mount Timor pierced the clouds, its peak still dusted with snow. The mountain is sacred to both Christians and Muslims. Each August, they climb together in pilgrimage, sharing the same path, the same prayers. Only in Albania could faith find harmony on a mountainside. To the south shimmered the Albanian Riviera, turquoise bays and untouched beaches that rival Greece but remain unknown to most travelers. To the north, the Dinaric Alps stood like sentinels, their slopes dotted with shepherds' huts. People think paradise is somewhere else, Mara said, watching the valley. But it's usually under your feet. You just have to stop running long enough to feel it. We headed back to town by twilight, and Berat turned golden. We ducked into a stone tavern lit by oil lamps. Before I could order, Mara shouted something to a short man with long eyebrows, the owner, I guessing, and he brought plate after plate, byrek, flaky pastry stuffed with spinach and cheese, tavikosi, lamb baked in yogurt until it melted under the fork, fergesi, a bubbling mix of peppers, tomatoes, and cottage cheese, and of course, raki, liquid lightning in a glass. You don't eat alone in Albania, Mara said. If you try, someone will sit beside you until you're not. She laughed as she told me how she learned to cook from her neighbor, an old widow named Mira. She said, "Sing while you stir, the food listens." Now Mara sings every morning as she bakes bread for her cafe. Behind us, a pair of musicians began plucking a chiftali, its two strings weaving joy into the air. I asked if she missed the stage lights. Sometimes, she said, but here every sunrise is an encore. Later that night, back at Blue Windows, the lights were low. She turned on the jukebox, a live recording from her touring days. Joe Cocker's voice filled the cafe, and she began to hum along. It wasn't performance, it was prayer. Her voice cracked on the high notes, but the beauty was in the breaking. When the last line faded, she smiled. "That's why I stayed," she said. "Not to remember him, but to remember me." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Outside, the Osum whispered under the moon, a rhythm older than any song. The next day, we wandered through modern Berat, murals blooming on old walls, cafes buzzing with laughter, students sketching by the riverside. Albania, she said, is full of people reinventing themselves. Writers, designers, remote workers, all drawn by affordability and authenticity. Americans can stay for a year, she said. Many never leave. They find quiet here, and quiet, it turns out, is addictive. She told me her cafe has become a meeting spot for this new tribe. A German novelist writing his memoir, a Canadian photographer living in a van, an American pilot who traded his wings for a vineyard. They came for the view, Mara laughed. They stayed for the people. Albania's government encourages it, offering long stays, residency options, and digital nomad perks. It's safe, inexpensive, and human. A cappuccino costs $1. A mountain view costs only your attention. And maybe that's the real draw. Albania makes you feel rich in ways money can't measure. The next morning, I woke early and followed the sound of voices to the market. The air was thick with aroma, fresh figs, roasted coffee, and the tang of goat cheese. Vendors called out prices in a melody that turned commerce into conversation. I watched a butcher sharpen his knife to the beat of street music. Women bargained cheerfully over honey jars. A little boy offered me a pomegranate and ran away laughing before I could pay. Mara appeared beside me, carrying a woven basket. "Everyone here knows everyone else," she said. "We trade more stories than coins." She stopped at a spice stall and handed me a small pouch. "Saffron from the mountains," she said. "The color of sunrise. Promise me you'll use it before you forget what this place feels like." I promised. By noon, it was time to leave. I crossed the Gorica Bridge again, the same path I'd taken days earlier, but somehow it felt different, like the bridge had measured who I was when I arrived and who I was now. The river below shimmered with the reflections of Berat's 1,000 windows, each one catching the sun like a fragment of memory. Somewhere behind me I heard faint music, a voice singing softly against the hum of the water. Maybe it was Mara, maybe just the wind carrying her song. Travel does that. It leaves echoes in places you can't return to but can never forget. And that's what Passports to the Past is all about. We don't just visit, we listen. We don't just look, we see. Because the soul of a country isn't found in its monuments, it's found in its people. Berat is one of those rare places that reflects you back. If you come here, be ready to see yourself in 1,000 windows. So if you ever find yourself in southern Albania, follow the sound of music and laughter. You might find a cafe with blue windows, a cup of courage disguised as coffee, and a woman who once sang backup for Joe Cocker, now singing quietly to the mountains. Because the most beautiful stories aren't written in ink or pixels. They're lived, one heartbeat, one conversation, one country at a time. This has been Passports to the Past. Travel smarter. We know where the bathrooms are.